Friday.
Woohoo!
I am Aaron Tomlinson, and he is.
I am Derrick Day.
It's great to be back. We took a little bit of a break because, of course, Derrick got married. I don't know if you guys saw it, but we did a live together, which was freaking
That was
amazing.
awesome.
It was just incredible. What a tremendous weekend. I got to meet you in person for the first time, got to meet Man
Yes,
in person for the first time,
yes.
and all your family and friends. And dude, it was just pure joy. It was just pure bliss from the time I landed to the time I took off. It was just absolutely amazing. Beautiful wedding, beautiful couple, beautiful people. I just can't say enough good about it. And I do want to throw this in. The world has fucking changed since we were together.
That it has.
I mean, we're sitting there at the rehearsal dinner, and somebody sends me a text and says, "Check your news sources."
Yeah,
Pick it up, and that was when the assassination attempt was
yeah,
carried out, and yeah, now we got a totally different dynamic in America.
yeah. And then you get Joe Biden dropping out of the race, and
Yep.
now Kamala Harris is the presumptive Democratic nominee, and then you had hostages released from Russia
Yep.
and the leader of Hamas being assassinated. I mean, this has been how long it's been?
It's
Matter
only
of
been
fact,
2 weeks,
Sunday will be 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay.
3 weeks,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and in 3 weeks, the world has completely been stood on its ear.
It's crazy. It's just totally crazy to think about. And of course, you were on your honeymoon. I was on vacation with my family last week, so it's great to be back together. Um, and what's in the glass tonight, Derek?
Well, a funny thing is, I'm drinking non-alcoholic Topo Chico sparkling water. Why? Because I had a little, how can I say it, a little health scare, right? And I'm not going to go into great detail about that. You know the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people that are watching this that know because they're close to me, as are you. But I'll be back to wine or liquor sometime next week. But for right now, today it's just going to be this.
No.
And that being said, what's in your glass?
Okay, so this is like an old fashioned that rocks. So when I was on vacation, I found this Knob Creek rye that is
Okay.
a smoky maple flavor.
Huh.
So you don't have to add any sweetness. I mean, it's got all the perfect amount of like sweetness in it, right?
Hmm.
And I tried some various different types of bitters. That didn't work very well. So this has just a little bit of orange juice in it
Okay.
and a dab of cherry juice,
Okay.
and it's just freaking amazing.
Okay. That's going to be one for the Freology Mixology book, which we got to get started on that.
Yeah, we do. We got lots to do.
Yeah, yeah, lots to do, lots to do. And in the Growing in Real Time book, how we all of the chapters have the drinks that we drank. So basically, what we need to do is go ahead and edit those out, take those out, and put those into the mixology book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stay tuned, folks. You're going to learn how to drink like Aaron and Derrick.
Yeah. Hopefully those will be out just in time for Christmas, huh? You
Yeah,
buy it like this Christmas.
yes, indeed, indeed. Let's
Yeah.
make that a goal.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll introduce tonight's topic. It was something I came up with or just thought about, but I want to talk about thinking outside of the box. Because I was really thinking, okay, what topic can we do for freeology? Like staying with the theme. What's going to produce freedom, break limitations
Yep.
off of people? And one of the biggest limitations that we have is the boxes that we think in. And we've done a good job of tearing up boxes over the years. We've torn up the religious box for sure, political boxes, racial and social boxes, right? But what about just problem solving? Because we tend to get locked. The brain thinks in patterns, right? So we tend to get locked into when we have a problem, when we're thinking about a solution to a problem, we generally only think about that in regards to the patterns that we have from our experiences.
Yep.
And we tend to break things down into either or, sometimes zero-sum games, but if not a zero-sum game, it's definitely I have to give up this to get this. I can either do this or that, but I can't do both.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when we have a problem, we tend to think of the solution in a binary way. I either do this or I do that, right? So somebody who is financially stuck in their career but wants to make more money, or someone who is finds himself unemployed, how can I solve this problem? Either I start my own business, or I put out a bunch of job applications, or I that would be a good example of that. Or I get a couple of job interviews and they both offer me the job, and so I take this job or I take that job, right?
Yeah.
When in reality, there's so many different ways to generate income or to increase our income. But especially if, like most of us in this country, we were raised predominantly in our families where a parent or both parents worked jobs or worked the same job or stayed within the same career, didn't know anything about generating multiple streams of income, maybe. So we're going to be locked into that paradigm, right? Yeah. And so what I hope this will do for people is give them the sense that if you feel trapped, if you're trying to solve a problem and you feel trapped and you just can't figure it out, maybe examine the box that you've put yourself in, the either ors that you've put yourself in. And maybe we can talk a little bit and share some suggestions tonight about how to get outside of the box thinking in order to solve problems.
And Aaron, that's a great introduction, because we are really prisoners of our own thinking paradigms, right? That we get trapped in what it is that we believe or what it is that we espouse, and so we use that as the framework for how we problem solve, how we interface with relationships, and all of these different things. So I was thinking about a couple of things. So one is I want to approach something from the quantum physics standpoint, and that is quantum computing. And why am I using this? Because regular digital computing, it's called digital computing because there are two digits involved, a 1 and a 0, right? 1 representing a state of on, 0 representing a state of off.
Right.
And the representation between the two is what they call Boolean. So it's either or this and this, right? But a bit cannot be in the same, it cannot be in multiple states at the same time. And so you're limited into how you can compute things, right? Because basically people talk about multitasking, and May and I have this discussion all the time. I said there's no such thing as multitasking, because even the best computers, when they're massively parallel, don't process things at the same time. Right. It's one thing being processed, and it's processed up to a particular point, then it switches to the next thing, and it processes that, and it does this in a big daisy chain, right? So in the case of quantum computing, so a binary 1 and 0, they're called bits. That's the technical name for them. They're bits. But in quantum computing, they have what's known as a qubit. And it's basically the word bit with a Q put in front of it. It's a quantum bit, right? And a quantum bit has the capability of being at the same state, or it could be in multiple states at the same time. And it can hold multiple values at the same time. So there are computations that it would take the most massively scalar supercomputer known right now, that it would take 1 million years.
Wow.
For it to perform this calculation, that a quantum computer is able to do the same thing in seconds.
Wow.
So why is this important? Because quantum computing holds that you can hold multiple states or multiple values in the same space at the same time. So when we start talking about thinking outside the box, we're talking about being able to, and you and I, we've talked about this a lot, that basically the key to free thinking, the key to phreology, if you will,
Right.
is being able to hold two disparate ideas in juxtaposition and weighing them out, considering them both equally, and then letting the superior value win. Now, when I say superior, it may not be superior overall. It may be superior to this moment, superior to this situation, superior to these people. There is no greater greater truth. In other words, that there are degrees of relevance to everything. So if you think about this, and I'm going to say this and I'll shut up, is that well, no, there's actually one more thing that I have to cover.
That's fine. You're doing good. You're doing good.
But when we talk about holding these multiple ideas, now we're saying, okay, that the answer may not be held in the box that we normally ascribe it to. That there may be a different state, a different value. There may be something different that we have to consider in order to make this work, right? And that's like one more thing with quantum physics, right? Is that quantum physics, quantum mechanics, as we understand it, works perfectly in explaining the universe until you get to gravity. When you add gravity into it, the whole computational matrix of this thing falls apart. Okay, so that's where you get a lot of these other, like string theory and things like that do a better job of explaining gravity within the framework of quantum mechanics, except no one has ever directly observed a string. Now, we've observed quarks, leptons, bosons, all of these subatomic particles. We've actually observed those, but not the string.
Right.
So anyway, what string theory does is it provides a out-of-the-box way of approaching how the universe is quantified. Okay, so that was the one thing. Now, the next thing is this is something that it happened like in the 1950s. They called it the 9 dots puzzle. So if you take 9 dots, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the goal of this problem is to connect all the dots using only 4 lines. But if you do that, there's only one way to do that, and that's to connect. You have to draw 2 lines that go outside the box. They have to go outside the 9 dots. Otherwise, the puzzle is unsolvable. And so in doing my research on this topic, that's where I found the origin of outside the box thinking.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So again, it's like when you're, or let's use a Star Trek analogy, right? Kirk was famous for what they call the Kobayashi Maru simulation. And the Kobayashi Maru was a no-win situation. In every execution, every iteration of this scenario, people died. There were massive casualties. But Kirk figured out a way so that no one died. And how did he do this? He rigged the simulation. In other words, before the simulation even got started, he changed the parameters of the test so that there was a winning alternative. And it was something that this was the thing that made him captain worthy in graduating from Starfleet Academy. That's the storyline, right? So again, thinking outside the box is whatever it is that we're presented with as a way to do things. Like, for example, Albert Einstein, he came up with this whole thing about special relativity. And everything was fine with special relativity until Niels Bohr showed up and said, wait a minute, buddy. That's fine, except that there are things that are happening at a smaller scale than what you're dealing with. And it was funny because, like, when they introduced the principle of entanglement, Einstein threw his hands up and said, "Whoa, that's spooky action at a distance. That's like, that can't possibly be work. That can't possibly work because the speed of light is a constraint of the universe, and you're saying that something can happen faster than the speed of light." And Bohr's like, "Yeah." So anyway, those are examples. And my setup of thinking outside the box. So there.
Yeah. So this idea of quantum computers being able to hold both things at the same time, or have different, rather than being binary on off, right? But being able to be different things at the same time, right? Different computations at the same time. So that's this. I've really been thinking about this because we tend to negotiate, like I said in the beginning, if we want something, we have to give up something. And we very seldom think about, or most people that I know very seldom think about, how can I have both things, even if they seem competing, even if they seem contrary to one another. There are lots of people that have figured out how to live in abundance and have nothing but free time.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. I like my free time, but I want to spend time with my family. But to make this amount of money, I've got to sell my soul to the corporation, or I got to work 2 jobs, or I got to work 3 jobs, or whatever, right? So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine that one of my colleagues, coworkers actually did recently, that really got me thinking about this. So she decided she wanted to try real estate, and she was tired of counseling, wanted to try real estate on the side. It didn't really, after a year doing that, it didn't really fit with her much, but she did acquire a new home, kept their home that they were living in, and rented it out. And they rented it out to a renter. Like, that's what you think, right? You just find a renter, you follow, how you rent houses. And let's say she was renting that house at, let's just say, $70 a day. I have no idea. I'm just pulling that number out of the air based on what my brain can do right now with the size of the house and what I think it would rent for. $75 a day, right?
Okay.
So didn't like the experience of, working with renters and stuff like that. So she decided to try Airbnb and Verbo when her renter moved out. Now, we live in Pueblo, dude. And like Pueblo, like there are memes you can find on the internet. There's one, it's really funny. It's from The Lion King, where, God, it's been so long since I've seen it. I can't remember the characters' names, but the father and the son, lion, right? Simba and Mufasa are sitting together, and they're looking at the elephant graveyard. And Simba says, "What is that dark, shadowy place over there?" And underneath it says, "Son, that's Pueblo. We don't ever go there." And that's just a joke in Colorado. Anybody that's Colorado native or whatever, you talk to them, Pueblo has often been called, when I was growing up, Pewtown, the armpit of Colorado. I mean, just all kinds of disparaging terms. And there's reasons for it. I mean, we are the sickest county in the state. We, at one point in time, I don't know if it's still true, but we were number 5 most violent city per capita in the nation. Lots of reasons to feel that way about Pueblo. And it's not really a great vacation spot. I mean, it's kind of in the more arid, hotter part of Colorado. There's no mountains around. The nearest ski resort is 2 hours away. No real attractions that would bring people in. And so I'm thinking to myself, Verbo, like, what? Well, I asked her recently how it's going, and she's like, it's going great. Because here's the thing. If she's renting that house at $75 a day to a renter, she can rent it for $300 a night to someone that wants to pay Verbo for it, or wants to do vacation rental by owner, right?
Yeah.
So she's more than tripling her money per day. And she works at the university, and the neighborhood that she's in is close to the university. So whenever family members want to come visit their kids, or people want to come watch them participate in athletics, or we do have a lake here that's pretty cool. She's had people, but the lake is 45 minutes from her house. Or they want to just, be close to the mountains or whatever. Anyway, she's been able to rent it about 3 weeks out of the month. Now, if you're tripling your money each day you rent it, and she says, I love it because they come in, I clean it up, and then I got the next group in there.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing as collecting rent, and they didn't pay rent this month, and I got to worry about, so many advantages to this, right? And you would think, Pueblo, that would never work in Pueblo. So that is the kind of outside of the box type of thinking that I'm thinking about, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I said, when it comes, so if you want abundance and free time, if you can take an honest assessment of your resources, an honest assessment of where you're at, like most people can't get ahead financially. I remember we brought this guy in to the church because we really wanted to empower people. We did a lot of really practical empowerment stuff. We had a literacy program. We had an adult literacy program. We had, and we did, a number of financial empowerment type stuff. And so instead of, just what every other church was doing, they were getting at the time Dave Ramsey's stuff and going through Dave Ramsey's stuff. And I'm thinking all Dave Ramsey's program does is make Dave Ramsey rich.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I had a friend that was a pastor who was, well into the millions. And when I stayed with him, and he pastored a church of like 50 people in Texas someplace. But he owned a Radio Shack. He owned a locksmith company. He owned a lawn mowing company. And, he had 2 or 3 airplanes and his own runway and hangar and all there on his property. And so I thought, well, I'm going to bring this guy in to tell us how to really do it, right? Beware the naked man who offers you his shirt, right?
Yeah.
And I remember his first message was, if you want financial freedom, you have to tell yourself the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I'm in my mid 30s, 34, I think 35 at the time. And I remember sitting across the table from him and we were living, paycheck to paycheck. My income was totally off of pastoring. I can't remember what job Julie had at the time. And I think we were $15,000 credit card debt, owed on cars, and he sat across from me. You got to tell yourself the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And he's telling me, what's your budget? So I'm like, budget? What the hell's a budget? What is that? And so I go through, okay. And a lot of people do this because I've done some, as a pastor, some kind of financial counseling somewhere along the way. Okay, I got my house payment, I got my utilities, I got my insurance payments, I got my food, I got my gas, and I got my entertainment, I got my clothes, shoes, and I'm done. And then I got this much money left over to just do whatever with, maybe I save a little bit for retirement or something. And he says, okay, he says, what about your license plate when registration, when it's time for that to be renewed? What about your tires? What about your paper products in the house? What about your cleaning supplies? He just starts going. And I remember, Derrick, I wanted to have a complete and total meltdown, right?
Oh, wow.
I was just like, oh, shit. He's like, you got to put a monthly budget for, again, cleaning supplies, car washes, new tires on the car, repairs on the house. And and I felt so powerless and overwhelmed at the time. I just wanted to die. And but see, that's the box I was in. That was the box I was in. What are the big expenses? I wasn't looking at how these other expenses show up in our lives as well. And so my point is, you have to take an honest assessment of your resources and where you're at. But just because you are where you are does not mean that you cannot be where you want to.
Right.
One thing is for sure, if you don't admit where you are, you are going to get completely lost and not get to your destination. You go to those, remember shopping malls were a big deal growing up. We would go hang out at the shopping mall because we didn't have all that stuff, that kids have today and stuff. And you'd go to maybe a new mall or something, a new city, and they'd have those big, maps of the mall, or maybe an airport map or something. You are here, right? You had to find where you are here before you could figure out where you were going. So before you can think outside the box, there has to be some self-awareness of the box that you're in.
Yep.
But I want people to be encouraged when you realize the box that you're in, that's the starting point to solving your problem. Because until you know you are here, you can't get anywhere.
Rowdy dogs. So, and thinking about that, we always talk about like the map versus the territory.
Yeah.
And how, the map is not the territory. But the thing is, the map is essential because once you've done the why, you've identified the why, so you know where you are, right? You know your starting point. and now you can actually create a journey. Excuse me, just a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
I would say that a lot of people, because when we're talking about why, we're talking about our motivation. I'm just going to say, Derrick, when we're talking about our why, we're talking about our motivation. We're talking about our purpose. We're talking about the reasons that we're doing these things.
Yep.
And a lot of people lose motivation because they're thinking about their why, even inside the box.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead with what you were going to say.
No. I was just saying that that in order to basically, there's a Chinese proverb that says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing is that if you don't know where you're going, any direction will get you there. Right. So in order for you to actually formulate a path, you have to figure out where you're going, which direction you're going. Now, I want to think about like Lewis and Clark when they are mapping out the Louisiana Purchase. There were no maps of the western part of the Americas.
Good point.
They didn't exist. So in order for them to do that, they had to do things. They had slave scouts, they had Native American scouts, and then they had some white scouts that had actually been into the frontier. And so in order to make this work for Lewis and Clark to effectively map out this territory that we had just purchased as a nation, they had to think outside the box. The standard way of surveying and cartography wasn't going to work because you're in uncharted territory. And so again, when we start thinking about how do we get somewhere, and using your point, okay, I want to have more free time, more time for my spouse, more time for my kids, more time to do the things that I like, but I also know that I want the money that it takes to buy this freedom, right? So if you think about this, working the standard 9 to 5, going to college, getting an education, getting a good job, and all of that, we know empirically that is a map that will not get you to that destination of holding these two things, comparatively. You can't juxtapose these two things with standard thinking. So when you look at people, I study people like Grant Cardone and Les Brown and Gary Vaynerchuk, and I study these guys, and I'm like, okay, how did they get to where they were going? They did something that was unconventional. They had to do unconventional things to get unconventional results. And the other thing that, and again, throw Tony Robbins in there too, but all of these guys, like if you look at them now, they have, if you look at their websites and look at the things that they're doing, they all have multiple streams of income.
Yeah.
They're doing multiple things. And not only are they doing multiple things, they're innovating. Gary Vaynerchuk came up with this thing. Well, first of all, how he got into business, he started selling. His parents owned a liquor store. And he said, okay, I'm going to marry the internet to the wine selection. He said, because I can't sell distilled spirits across state lines, but I can sell wine. And he creates the model for how wine is sold across the country and around the world. He creates that out of thin air. What did he do? He thought outside the box. He's like, I'm never going to get rich by selling wine out of my parents' store. But if I can scale this to where this becomes the hub by which I'm pushing this product out, now I can do something different. And again, like Grant Cardone with his approach to real estate, commercial real estate, he innovated. He took some things that people were already doing, but he tweaked them in such a way that they were scalable. Mm-hmm. So what am I getting at is that it's thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box is the only way to produce an unconventional or outstanding result, right? Think about football and the West Coast offense. Or you think about the Bears and the nickel defense, Buddy Ryan's defense, right? When these people they came up with unconventional approaches to conventional problems that produce unconventional or outstanding results. So when we think about thinking outside the box, this is the growing in real time moment. Because as I'm saying this, I'm growing and I really need to be writing this down, but thankfully it's recorded.
Yes.
So we can always go back and get it.
Yeah.
But when like if I'm thinking about doing something, I have to say, okay, what is the linear approach to this? What is the linear approach? And then let's say that I bend the lines, or that I cross the lines, or that I create lines that circumscribe the problem, or that penetrate but think of all of these different ways, and then say, okay, how can I is there a way of incorporating the best of each of these to create a method that didn't exist before? Now, in that case, now I'm not thinking in terms of the lines. I'm not thinking about the way that anybody else has done it. I'm trying to create an unconventional approach to this problem. And that, I think, is the key. This is for me, this is the growing in real time moment, because if you are approaching a problem the way everyone else has approached the problem, the very best that you can get is the very best outcome that anybody else before you get. But if that outcome doesn't meet your expectation, then that means that somehow you've got to figure out how to violate that constraint. Mm-hmm. And watch this, because when we say violate, that's a triggering word, right? Because you say violate and you think about my rights being violated, my person being violated, my space being violated,
right.
And you get this is our box. This is a box. But if you say, okay, I'm going to violate this in terms of what are the rules around this, I'm going to violate that in order to produce a better outcome in the same space. Now you're not violating anybody's rules, you're not violating anybody's person, anybody's philosophy, or anything like that. What you're doing is you're violating the pattern, right? And again, when we go from from one-dimensional to two-dimensional to three-dimensional to four-dimensional to multi-dimensional, every time that we increase our dimensional understanding, we are violating a constraint. Mm-hmm. We are breaking something. We are breaking some paradigm, some mathematical model, some philosophical model, in order to get from here to there. Mm-hmm. And that's so. I'm having a thinking in real time moment.
So here's an out of box example I think everybody can relate to. So I mentioned, and it relates to what you're saying. So I mentioned Vrbo and Airbnb, right?
Yep.
So you got Vrbo, you got Airbnb, you have Uber, you have Lyft.
Turo. Have you heard of Turo?
No.
Turo is a rental car. It's basically like Airbnb for your car.
Okay, Turo.
Yep.
But also Amazon.
Yep.
YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Netflix.
TikTok.
What do they all have in common? Let's just take Uber. Before, if you were going to pay for a ride, what'd you have to do?
Taxi cab.
Yeah, and there had to be a taxi company.
Yep.
That had a fleet. And so all the expense of having a garage and having mechanics and having whatever.
Yep.
Right? So all we do is create a way to connect consumers with producers or with providers.
Yep.
So now, if you paid $10 for a taxi cab ride, pay $7 at the beginning. I've noticed that taxis and Ubers are about the same now. But at the beginning, I pay $10 for a taxi ride, but I could pay $6 for this Uber ride, right? Yep. No overhead as far as the fleet goes. No buying the cars, no maintenance. But it also creates opportunity for other people. I want to make some extra money. I can drive Uber. I can make a little bit of money, right?
Yep.
Same thing with Vrbo. Would you rather stay? I don't know why anybody, and I still do, but if you're going on a vacation, I don't know why anybody would stay in a hotel anymore.
Yeah.
I really don't know why. Because for the same amount of money, you can stay in a house.
Yep.
And so you don't have to build the building. You don't have to hire the maids. You don't have to have somebody watching the front desk. None of that stuff.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Amazon. How much has Amazon made just with books? And coming up with Kindles was brilliant, because now there's no publishing company.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's no paper. There's no ink. There's no editor.
Right.
There's no staff. How much have they made, even though they take a small percentage of all these writers that want to be writers?
Mm-hmm.
Now they can self-publish. The reason you had to have a publisher before was you had no way, if you created something like that, to connect it to a consumer.
Right.
So now Amazon is connecting producers to consumers. Netflix, same thing.
Yep.
We don't have to maintain a studio. We don't have to have a production company.
Yep.
You bring us your stuff. You stream it on our streaming. It's brilliant, and they all have that same thing in common. And we can look at that and kind of. I mean, there've been many days I thought Jeff Bezos is a capitalist asshole, but I got to thinking about it. But he does, even though he's making money off of it, and he is giving people opportunity that couldn't make money off their product or get their product out to consumers, the opportunity to do that. So there's all these opportunities that there wasn't before for people if they know where to look.
Yeah. And let's hang our hat on Amazon for just a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about Amazon publishing, but Amazon does so much more than that.
I know.
They have Amazon service offering. Amazon is getting into healthcare now. Amazon sells products, and you can actually own your own Amazon store. And Amazon will take care of all the fulfillment for you. You don't have to have any inventory. All you do is you're advertising a product. You're selling the product. And for Amazon to handle all of this, they charge you like 20%.
Yep.
20% of your revenue. And now your products are listed on Amazon as if they're Amazon products. There's no distinction. Mm-hmm. Right? So there are so many things that Amazon has done. You were talking about like Airbnb and Vrbo. That they're getting in the commercial space now because there's all this vacant commercial real estate, and there are people that they only need an office for a couple of days. So they can go in and Vrbo an office or Airbnb an office and have an office presence, have a big conference, and then after it's all over and done with, they go on about their merry old way, and this commercial property goes back to being vacant until the next person occupies it. It's really brilliant.
It is. I remember, I don't believe in name dropping, but I remember I met and became fairly acquainted with a pretty heavy hitter in Hollywood that was a producer, really changed television in a lot of ways. And I remember having dinner with them and having a conversation. And this was, 10, 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. And he told me Netflix has completely changed the game with Hollywood. And he kind of laid out and predicted for me, and he explained this model to me with Netflix and predicted to me basically what was going to happen in terms of movies and things like that. So I don't know how many direct to Netflix or direct to Amazon. I don't even think Amazon was in the streaming business at the time.
No.
Hulu didn't even exist.
No.
So I don't know how many direct to Netflix movies had been made or series had been made. I mean, Cobra Kai, look at the success Cobra Kai's had on Netflix. Yep. That started as a YouTube. YouTube's another one, connecting creators to consumers. But that started on YouTube. That was the very first idea I think they had for YouTube streaming service or something. Wow. And it kind of flopped. And then they were able to kind of revive it.
Yeah.
On Netflix, and it became amazing. But it's the same concept. They don't have to have a studio. They don't have to pay for the production. It's not 20th Century Fox producing it on their property in wherever, Florida or Hollywood or wherever. It's just people going out and producers going out and making movies, finding investors to do that expense and then selling it to consumers.
Yeah. And, Eddie Murphy, his last two movies, Dolomite and Axel F, the latest Beverly Hills Cop, direct to Netflix, right? Yeah. So if you think about this, you don't have to own a studio. All you have to do is rent the space,
Yep.
right? You don't have the standard Hollywood overhead. So you're paying a lot of people scale. You're not paying big. You have some big part players in there, like Paul Reiser back in there. You pay people like that, but it's like everybody else is like, they're up and comers, right? You pay them scale, and then you take this and you say, okay, I'm working with this small budget, and you go to Netflix and you say, okay, I want to produce this. I'm Eddie Murphy. I can bring the big name, and and go to Netflix, and Netflix will say, okay, we definitely want to air this. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a little bundle of money for exclusivity's sake. You bring it here, and because the overhead is so small, what Netflix has to shell out is relatively small, and they put it out there and they make a killing on it.
Yep.
I mean, the model is amazing, but again, that's outside of the box thinking, because if Warner Brothers, MGM, Universal, if they had thought about all this 20th century, they could have been in on this, but now they're all late adopters.
Remember when you got your DVDs from Netflix?
Yeah.
Mail?
Yeah.
Could you have ever imagined what it would become?
No.
I mean, if you could have, you would have put all your money into Netflix.
Absolutely.
Or Amazon, when it was just you would buy a book and they'd ship it to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's hard for us to catch up. So here's a problem, I think, Derrick. Like we talked about, and I'll tie this into something we were talking about at the beginning of the show, because I was thinking about, it's like, this is the craziest. I mean, I thought last 2020 was the craziest election cycle we'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And you keep hoping maybe something will get back to normal. Things ain't ever going back to normal.
No, normal is done.
It's done, and normal for us,
Yeah.
And I thought, and I remember I told you when we were, your wedding weekend, when Trump, with those images of him coming up with his fist in the air, and iconic, puts him in a category with, very few politicians that have been shot at.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's it. I was resigning myself.
Yep.
To 4 more years of Donald Trump. And I've never seen anybody squander favorability. If anybody could do it, this guy could do it. I have never seen someone squander so much goodwill in such a short period of time on a national political scale in my entire life. Here's my point. Like, that's rapid change. It's like you're sitting back, what has happened? What has happened in the last 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And whether people like it or not, Kamala Harris she's leading in the national polls now. She's leading in the swing states now, in almost every poll that comes out. And it's only been 2 weeks. She raised $370 million in July.
Right.
But keep in mind, that's only 10 days.
Right.
They're saying she's raised 300 on Fox. She raised, 300 or 327, whatever. I think it's $327 million in the month of July. And I'm like, you fools, she's raised that in 10 days. Now, here's the thing. 94% of that money that was raised came from donations that were less than $200.
Yep.
And 60% came from first-time donations.
Yeah.
So what does that do? Everybody's like, oh, that's George Soros money. No. She raised over $250 million from donations from people that was less than $200. It's breaking all the boxes.
Yeah.
So the challenge that we have, it's breaking all the boxes. I mean, what does that do to your big time boner? Big time boner.
Yeah, we know where your head is, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time boner. Just came off vacation.
Well, I'm excited about the change. Well, I'm just excited about the change. You remember when you were younger?
Hey, dude, I just came off my honeymoon. So
no. But what I'm saying is, when you were younger, it didn't have to be sexual. You'd be sitting there for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, just like.
Yeah. But it breaks the box, because you got these big time donors that are controlling policy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens when these candidates realize, I don't need you anymore?
Right. Yeah.
And maybe things aren't as dystopian as I've been thinking the last 4 years. Maybe there will be candidates that realize, if I do the will of the people, I can be funded by the people.
Maybe there's still hope.
I think there is, man. I mean, think about it. If I realize I don't have to cater to these donors, and if I've got a good vision for the people, and what if the small donor becomes the main cash flow to politicians, then they have to do the will of the people.
Yep.
And that's why these guys, these old guys, these old politicians, and these people like Rupert Murdoch, and that's why they're so angry and upset and dividing us and would rather destroy us and take the country down than see these changes come about. Wow.
That's an outside the box assessment.
94% of $327,000
million
was, why did I say thousand? Because that's how I think. $327 million. Thank you for correcting me. Donations of $200 or less.
Amazing. I mean, that, and again, like you said, this brings up, okay, who are you beholden to?
Exactly.
Because if the majority of your money is coming from the rank and file, then that means that's who you need to answer to.
Yep.
And if if that money begins to outweigh the billionaire money, and see that, so this comes up to another thing, like what is that? Citizens United, right? If you take away Citizens United and take away this whole corporate personhood and the free speech of corporations thing, and say that corporate money must be limited, right? That you can't just throw money at a candidate or throw money at a slate or ideology, right? And you force it downward.
Yeah.
So that let's say the maximum amount that anybody can contribute to a campaign, let's say is $2,000.
Yeah.
Any one person can contribute. So now, if in order to get that money, you're going to have to, drill down. You're going to have to double click on the general populace and get that money there, because that's where the low hanging fruit is. You're going to have to get that money and make it work for you. And then if you do that, now we're talking about getting the will of the people done. So, dude, kudos to you on that. Another growing in real time moment.
I'm trying to look up something here, but I'm not able to. It's not working for me. I heard a number and I want to quote it correctly. A couple numbers today, but since 2016, something like 20 million baby boomers have died since 2016. And I want to say something like 30 million registered voters in America are biracial.
Wow.
And I heard that and I thought, my kids are biracial. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
I just had a family reunion and dang, we're white, dude. I mean, like, we've done our DNA samples and stuff. I haven't done mine yet. And I have to say, I tan a lot better than the other members of my family.
Yeah.
I don't burn as easily.
Yeah, dude, I think you're a little blacker than I am.
I didn't get the blue eyes or the blonde hair. So I don't know what my DNA will show. But my sisters have all done it. And I mean, it's just 100%, European, from various different regions, most of it from the British Isles, but some of it from, Germany and Danish and whatever. And I thought, I've got biracial children, so that's going to carry on. I look at my nieces and nephews. My nephew, who I love dearly, is probably going to marry a woman from South Africa. My niece married a woman who's a Pacific Islander. So America is becoming biracial.
Yeah, the melting pot is really happening.
But so what's going to be interesting about this election cycle, and I know we don't want to turn people off of politics or whatever, but what's going to be interesting about this election, because this fits with outside the box, maybe not with solving problems, but maybe it does. Maybe we're talking about national problems now.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, in my opinion, the former guy is trying to run his 2016 playbook. And in just 8 years, the demographics have completely changed.
Yeah.
Completely changed, radically changed. I mean, if you're talking 20 million, and again, I was trying to look up those numbers, but I couldn't find them. But let's just say, hypothetically, 20 million people that were your typical baby boomer, Reagan Republican voter have died since 2016. And no, I think the 30 million, well, there was another number. I think it was 30 million. So I might have the biracial part wrong. I might have the biracial part wrong. 30 million more people have joined the electorate in the last 8 years. So you have 20 million that have died off. You have 30 million coming in. It's a completely different group that you're campaigning for. So you can't run the 2016 strategy in 2024 because it's not the same.
So, I just looked something up because this was a growing in real time moment, right? Because if you say, what is the fastest growing racial demographic in America, and you just ask that question in a silo, you get Asian Americans, fastest growing, right? But if you just change the text a little bit, reframe the question, and I ask, is biracial the fastest growing racial demographic? And it says the fastest growing racial group in this country is those who identify themselves as two or more races.
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, because that's just who we're becoming,
But watch this, right? Remember the Cheerios commercial? Just a few years ago, it was a black husband with a white wife, and they had a little biracial daughter, and the daughter was telling the dad about how heart healthy Cheerios are, and this was a very popular commercial for two reasons. Because some people were looking at that, look, oh, that's cute, this nice mixed family, right? And then there was another group like, the fuck? Why am I looking at a mixed race family in my Cheerios commercial? And it was absolutely polarizing. And General Mills had to come out and do a whole bunch of damage control. But to General Mills' credit, they doubled down on this and started advertising for other cereals and other General Mills products that were, they were biracial. And the next one to use that was Procter and Gamble. They followed suit and doubled down on it. The point is that this is a demographic now that people are going to have to acknowledge. It's like the traditional ways of seeing black and white.
Yep.
That's going away. And then when you start talking about two or more races, that doesn't necessarily mean black and white.
Right.
It could be black and Hispanic or white and Latino. Now the dynamic gets broader as the country gets browner. And now in order to marketing, right? Education, healthcare, politics, all of these things are going to have to reframe themselves to catch this demographic. And so again, I think that we're experiencing something where we're thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box is actually going to become the norm. Yep. It's going to become, matter of fact, the out of the box thinking as far as like a racial identity in this country is going to become the norm. It'll become the paradigm. It's going to reshape itself into the box.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to require of us, going back to one of our very first episodes, I think, that we did on resilience.
Yeah.
It's going to require that we embrace change, that we adapt with change. That's why we miss opportunities, because again, the map, it's not the territory, right? Yeah. I'm still trying, and I'm speaking. This is I'm confessing my sins to Father Derrick. I know that I still think in maybe a 2004 world. It may go back as far as that. I still think in a 2004, 2008 world. And I was trying to point out, like, the difference between 2016 and 2024, like, we can't look at that and say Hillary lost. America's not ready to elect a woman, much less a woman of color, because that's a 2016.
That's a 2016, yeah. But now it's clear that that this is a possibility, if not a probability. And again, like I remember when Obama got elected, it's like Obama's the first African American president. Well, he had biracial parents, right? And that only got discussed as a nuance and not as a central driver, right? But what I think that a lot of people missed about Obama was that Obama was sort of a paradigm in and of himself, that he was a symbol of the change that was occurring.
Yep.
So now you have Kamala Harris, who is Black and Indian, right? And she's married to a Jewish man. And, the whole, I mean, there's a whole lot to unpack there, just from an ethnicity standpoint.
Yeah. And they're hiding JD Vance's wife now, by the way. I don't know if I saw a speech where he was like, I'd have my wife come up and speak with you, but she's shy.
Yeah. No, she's not white. and that doesn't play to their demographic or I won't say their demographic, but their audience.
Yeah. The former guy manages to find his cuck, doesn't he?
Here's the funny thing about this, right? Is that I think that in neither election, Trump was not looking to get elected. What he was looking to do was build his brand in iteration A, 2016. But in 2020 and 2024, he's not looking to build his brand. He's looking to stay out of prison.
Yeah.
Because as long as he could kick the election can down the road, he's sort of untouchable, and the Supreme Court has already kind of given him a hall pass on that. So, so even that is an out of the box thinking. I mean, in other words, you're not campaigning to win; you're campaigning to stay free.
I know, it's crazy. Hey man, we're coming up on the end of our hour. Don't see a lot of comments. Probably we haven't been on for a couple of weeks, so we lost our consistency, but we needed the break. It was good. I hope you had a great honeymoon.
I did. Yeah. And can't wait to tell you all about it, but had an awesome time. And I'm grateful that, I found the woman of my dreams. I just, I can't stress that enough. I'm over the moon happy. And Maya, if you're still listening, I love you, baby. That's it. So, and Aaron, thank you for coming on. I love you, man.
It was amazing. It was amazing. Something I'll remember the rest of my life and cherish for sure.
Absolutely.
So, all right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this by replay, let us know your thoughts in the comments on stuff that we shared. And otherwise, we should be back at the same bat time and the same bat station
next week.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk, Growing in Real Time with us. And we'll see you next week.
Love y'all.